Brothers, good afternoon. As you recall, we had the first part of Archbishop Charles Scicluna presentation on Book 6 of the Code of Canon Law yesterday. We will now view the second part. Archbishop Listecki has some comments about it.
Thank you, Archbishop Gomez. Brothers, I want to thank you for your attentiveness to part one of the Archbishop Scicluna's presentation. The second part we will hear today, and it is slightly shorter. In it, the Archbishop outlines many of the new crimes articulated in the revised norms. There are some very important changes in this section, including norms that governs financial maladministration and the crimes associated with sexual abuse. Some of you have already shared with me questions you would like Archbishop Scicluna to address in his question and answer session scheduled for December 1st, 11 to 12 Central Time. If there are questions that you have, you can direct them to myself, any of the members of the Canon Law and Governance Committee, or to Dr. Siobhan Verbeek. Please continue to think about the opportunity for those questions as you listen to Archbishop Scicluna in the second installment of this presentation. I offer my thanks to our bishops who gather on this committee. They have done yeoman's work, and to Dr. Siobhan Verbeek for her directions, her staff direction. I also ask you to remember the direction by Bishop Barczyk, who offered various gatherings that will happen for implementation before our next general session, where we will have a drill down on implementation for the bishops. With that, I thank Archbishop Gomez and the conference for this presentation.
Thank you, Archbishop.
Of Book 6, which deals with particular offences and the penalties established for them. Most of the delays that we find in 1983 version of Book 6 have been kept. Some have been moved or reorganized, but there are some important novelties. And I will try to offer a brief commentary on these new aspects following the order in which the new canons appear. That is, there are no novelties under Title I, offences against the faith and the unity of the Church. But when it comes to Title II, offences against church authorities and the exercise of duties, there is Canon 1371, which has a number of new aspects. In fact, if we go to paragraph 2 of 1371, we have a new reference to a delict here. A person who violates obligations in both by a penalty is to be punished with the penalties mentioned in 1336, 2 and 4. These are the expiatory penalties. Number 3, a person who is asserting or promising something before an ecclesiastic authority commits perjury is to be punished with a just penalty. Number 4, a person who violates the obligation of observing the pontifical secret is to be punished with the penalties mentioned with expiatory penalties. A person who fails to observe the duty to execute an executive sentence is to be punished with a just penalty, not excluding a censor. And this is a very interesting new norm, paragraph 6 of 1371. A person who neglects to report an offence when required to do so by a canonical law is to be punished according to the provision of Canon 1336, paragraphs 2 to 4, expiatory penalties, with the addition of other penalties according to the gravity of the law. So if you ask me, what law requires a person to report an offence, and the reference is to vos extis lux mundi, where the Pope actually explicitly introduces this duty to report in Article 3, and it says, except as provided by canon law, whenever a cleric or a member of an institute of consecrated life or of a society of apostolic life has notice or well-founded motive to believe that one of the facts referred to in Article 1, which is actually sexual misconduct or cover-up, has been committed, that person is obliged to report promptly the fact to the local ordinary where the offence are said to have occurred, or to an ordinary among those referred in Canon 134 of the Code of Canon Law. And of course, this is an obligation which has been introduced in canonical law by the motu proprio Vos estis lux mundi. Another important new canon is 1376, which introduces crimes connected with the administration of ecclesiastical property. The following are to be punished with the penalties, expiatory penalties, without prejudice to the obligation of repairing the harm. Number 1, a person who steals ecclesiastical goods or prevents the proceeds from being received. Number 2, a person who, without the prescribed consultation, consent, or permission, or without another requirement imposed by law for validity or for lawfulness, alienates ecclesiastical goods or carries out an act of administration over them. And of course, this not only through dolus, but also through negligence, because in paragraph 2 we have the following are to be punished, not excluding the deprivation of office, without prejudice to the obligation of repairing the harm, if a person who through grave personal culpability commits the offence mentioned in 1 number 2, and 1 number 2 is the question of alienation of ecclesiastical goods or carries act of administration without consultation, consent, or permission. It's very important when dioceses need to declare bankruptcy. In the United States, what you call Chapter 11 bankruptcy, or even the alienation of property like churches, etc. A person who is found to have been otherwise gravely negligent in administering ecclesiastical goods is also to be punished. This is paragraph 2 of 1376, number 2. 1377 revitalizes, gives new life to a canon from the 1917 code, which was forgotten in the 1983 revision, but has been actually reintroduced. And this is corruption in finances in the church. A person who gives or promises something so that someone who exercises an office or function in the church would unlawfully act or fail to act is to be punished. Likewise, the person who accepts such gifts or promises is to be punished according to the gravity of the offence, not excluding by deprivation of office without prejudice to obligation of repairing the harm. Another important rule, a person who in the exercise of an office or function requests an offering beyond that which has been established, or additional sums, or something for his or her own benefit, is to be punished with an appropriate monetary fine or with other penalties, not excluding deprivation of office without prejudice to the obligation of repairing harm. Notice the insistence of the legislation on the obligation of repairing harm, of paying damages. Another important canon in this section is Canon 1378. A person who, apart from the cases already foreseen by the law, abuses ecclesiastical power, office, or function is to be punished according to the gravity of the act or the omission, not excluding by deprivation of the power or office without prejudice to the obligation of repairing harm. A person who through culpable negligence, unlawfully, and with harm to another or scandal, performs or omits an act of ecclesiastical power, office, or function, is to be punished according to the provision of Canons 1336, expiatory penalties, without prejudice to the obligation of repairing harm. When we come to Title 3 of this second part of Book 6, offences against the sacraments, the new Book 6 introduces into the Code a number of special laws that were promulgated after 1983, after the Code, that will now be abrogated for Book 6 on the 8th of December. In fact, we have the delicta graviora introduced by Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela in 2001 and then revised in 2010. We also have the introduction of a delete concerning the ordination of women. In fact, Canon 1379, paragraph 2 states, both a person who attempts to confer a sacred order on a woman and a woman who attempts to receive the sacred order incur a lata sententia excommunication reserved to the Apostolic See. A cleric, moreover, may be punished by dismissal from the clerical state. Canon 1382, for example, states that one who throws away the consecrated species or for a sacrilegious purpose takes them away or keeps them incurs a lata sententia excommunication reserved to the Apostolic See. A cleric, moreover, may be punished with some other penalty, not excluding dismissal from the clerical state. When it comes to the real novelty, we find it in paragraph 2, which states, a person guilty of consecrating for a sacrilegious purpose one element only, or both elements within the Eucharistic celebration or outside it, is to be punished according to the gravity of the offense, not excluding by dismissal from the clerical state. Now, in 1386, we have a list of offenses against the dignity of the sacrament of reconciliation. So we have the violation of the sacramental seal, but we also have the introduction in Book 6 of something that we find in the list of graviora, delicta from Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela. In fact, paragraph 3 of 1386 states, without prejudice to the provisions of paragraphs 1 and 2, any person who by means of any technical device makes a recording of what is said by the priest or by the penitent in a sacramental confession, either real or simulated, or who divulges it through the means of social communication, is to be punished according to the gravity of the offense, not excluding, in the case of a cleric, by dismissal from the clerical state. Another important canon in this title, Title 3, is Canon 1389, that states a person who, apart from the cases mentioned in 1379, 1388, unlawfully exercised the office of a priest or another sacred ministry is to be punished with a just penalty. Title 4 has a new title, which is to be the crime of falsehood. Now it's offences against reputation and the offence of falsehood. Title 5 deals with offences against special obligations, and the main focus is on the obligations of clerics. In fact, 1392 deals with the voluntary abandonment of ministry, and it states, a cleric who voluntarily and unlawfully abandons the sacred ministry for 6 months continuously with the intention of withdrawing himself from the competent church authority will be punished, and in the more serious cases may be dismissed from the clerical state. 1393 returns on the question of financial improprieties. A cleric or religious who engages in trading or business contrary to the provisions of the canons is to be punished according to the gravity of the offense. And number 2 of this canon 1393 states, a cleric or religious who, apart from the cases already foreseen by the law, commits an offense in a financial matter or gravely violates the stipulations contained in Canon 285 is to be punished without prejudice to the obligation of repairing harm. This is one of the cases where statute of limitations remains 3 years. The last 3 canons in this title concern sexual misconduct. 1394 talks about the attempt by a cleric to marry, even if only civilly. And 1395 then is totally reorganized. And it's worth going through 1395, which also has a statute of limitations of 7 years. A cleric living in concubinage, other than in the case mentioned in Canon 1394, which is, of course, when he marries civilly, and a cleric who continues in some other external sin against the 6th commandment of the Decalogue, which causes scandal, is to be punished with suspension. To this, other penalties can progressively be added if, after warning, he persists in the offense until eventually he can be dismissed from the clerical state. 1395 paragraph 2 states, a cleric who has offended in other ways against the 6th commandment of the Decalogue, if the offense was committed in public, is to be punished with just penalties, not excluding dismissal from the clerical state if the case so warrants. And paragraph 3, a cleric who by force, threats, or abuse of his authority commits an offense against the 6th commandment of the Decalogue, or forces someone to perform or submit to sexual acts, is to be punished with the same penalty as in paragraph 2, that is, with just penalties, not excluding dismissal from the clerical state if the case so warrants. So this is an important novelty because sexual misconduct is also linked to the abuse of authority, and it also is a delict when a person abusing his authority forces someone to perform or submit to sexual acts. The last title of Book 6 is Title 6, which is Offences Against Human Life, Dignity and Liberty. 1397 reproduces the old law concerning persons who commit homicide or who by force or by fraud abduct, imprison, mutilate, or gravely wounds another person. But 1398 is an important canon which has been moved to this section from the section dedicated to special offences, especially of clergy, and now is under the title Offences Against Human Life, Dignity and Liberty. 1398 paragraph 1 states, a cleric is to be punished with deprivation of office and with other just penalties, not excluding, where the case calls for it, dismissal from the clerical state, if he, number 1, commits an offense against the 6th commandment of the Decalogue with a minor or with a person who habitually has an imperfect use of reason, or with one to whom the law recognizes equal protection. Now, this is abuse of minor, and also abuse of a person who habitually has an imperfect use of reason. And this is something that is included under abuse of minor in Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela. And as such, this first bit is equal to the delictum gravius reserved to the competence of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. But the law adds a person with one or with one to whom the law recognizes equal protection. Now, canon lawyers have been discussing the meaning of this because, unfortunately, the law is not as clear as one would have liked it here, but I have it in good authority that this is a reference to what the Pope has stated in Vos Estis Lux Mundi. In fact, in Article 1 of Vos Estis Lux Mundi, Pope Francis talks about delicts against the sixth commandment of the Decalogue. And he lists 3 types of delicts: forcing someone by violence or threat or abuse of authority to perform or submit to sexual acts. We have already seen that that has been introduced under 1395, paragraph 3. Performing sexual acts with a minor or a vulnerable person. Now, under this Article 1, paragraph 1, letter A, number 2, the vulnerable person is also recognized equal in protection. Then it's not the same level as a disabled person, a mentally disabled person, or a minor, but they have been accorded equal protection by the law. So Canon 1395 is a reference to abuse, sexual abuse of vulnerable person. This means, however, that the local bishop has to take care of these cases, because the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith has and enjoys jurisdiction over the cases in its special norms, that is in the Sacramentorum Sanctitatis Tutela. But misconduct, sexual misconduct with vulnerable adults for whom the law recognizes equal protection under Vos Estis Lux Mundi is not reserved to the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. In fact, number 2 of 1398 also says that a cleric is to be punished if he grooms or induces a minor or a person who habitually has an imperfect use of reason, or one to whom the law recognizes equal protection, to expose himself or herself pornographically or to take part in pornographic exhibitions, whether real or simulated. And this is also a reflection of the law of Vos Estis Lux Mundi from Article 1, paragraph 1, where delicts against the sixth commandment consist also in the production, exhibition, possession or distribution, including by electronic means, of child pornography, as well as by the recruitment or inducement of a minor or a vulnerable person to participate in pornographic exhibitions. Another delict introduced into the new Book 6, which originated from the list of graviora delicta, more grave crimes reserved to the jurisdiction of the CDF, is found in 1398, paragraph 1, number 3. And this states, cleric has to be punished if a person who immorally acquires, retains, exhibits, or distributes in whatever manner and by whatever technology pornographic images of minors or of persons who habitually have an imperfect use of reasons. Now, paragraph 2 of 1398 is a true novelty, because you may remember that in the old 1395, sexual abuse of minors, sexual misconduct was linked to the cleric, and that's why it was under the special obligations section or title. But paragraph 2 of 1398 states, a member of an institute of consecrated life, or of a society of apostolic life, or any one of the faithful who enjoys a dignity or performs an office or function in the church, who commits an offense mentioned in paragraph 1 or in paragraph 3, that is, abuse of minors or pornography concerning minors, is to be punished according to the provision of Canons 1336, paragraph 2 to 4, that is punished by expiatory penalties, with the addition of other penalties according to the gravity of the offense. This is a very important development because we don't only have sexual misconduct concerning clerics, whether secular or religious, now we have also other members of religious institutes or society of apostolic life, and also lay leaders in the community. This obviously will need interpretation and jurisprudence. What is the real meaning of any one of the faithful who enjoys a dignity or performs an office or function in the church? But lay people who are in leadership or have a special responsibility in the church can also be accused and also condemned for sexual misconduct. Now, as the Pope said in his conclusion to his apostolic constitution, Pascite Gregem Dei, we bishops need to understand that applying the new law, applying Book 6 as from 8 December 2021, becomes and is fundamentally an expression of our pastoral charity. I would like to thank you for your attention, and I hope that when we have the webinar with a question and answer session, I would be able to oblige. Thank you very much.